I have a problem. Well, really more like a dilemma. You see, I'm addicted to tiny containers. I just can't help myself. They call to me from wherever they are in the store, and they call even louder when they're on sale. But then I get them home, and what am I supposed to put in this? I mean, this is for golf balls, and I don't even own a golf ball, let alone go golfing. Maybe we could fit an entire diorama inside? Let's give it a try. I'm Sayer, and this is Witch Cove Crafts. This is going to be a bit of a challenge, but let's see what we can do. The first challenge is just going to be fitting a battery in this thing. But before even that, we'll need some kind of story for the diorama. Let's start with the miniature. I'm thinking this $5 Pathfinder Oracle will do nicely, though I want to make some modifications to her to better fit her in the display, and maybe let's see if we can get a light in there for the flame. These blister pack miniatures are a lot of fun. They're affordable, and you can find all sorts of weird designs. I love the ones with clear bits. But one downside is that their softer plastic doesn't hold as much detail, and they often have a lot of flashing. The plastic lines cause where the two half of the molds meet. We can clean it up a bit with a hobby knife by gently scraping the blade over the mold lines. You want to scrape away from where the blade is pointing, rather than towards it so you don't cut into the model and make gouge marks. For the base, let's pull out as much of this plastic as we can. I might just be able to fit a CMOS battery pack in here if we hollow out the supports. And we'll need to clean up the mini a bit too, getting rid of the molded base and snipping off the spear. It's a little too chunky and the length in both back and front doesn't give me a lot of room to work with. Instead, I think I'll use this little sword for my bits box. Whenever I build a mini, I save all the extra pieces for kit bashing like this in the future. The X-Acto is enough to carefully trim down the sword shape and carve off the more demon-y bits in the original design. Now I can finish cutting out the base and gluing in the battery pack. Super Glue Accelerator is, as always, absolutely magical for this. I'm going to use the knife to improve the detail on the figure just a bit more by splitting up some of these bands the character has wrapped around her arms and then locking them in place with glue. Pin vise with a jeweler's bit lets me drill a hole through the character's hand, and then I can slide a sewing pin through and clip off both ends to leave a strong mounting point for the blade. That was weird. With the pin in place, I can drill a hole in the blade and attach it. Then it's back to the bits box to find a suitable pommel, in this case courtesy of the Sangor arm from Warhammer. Now let's try and get a light in the hand. The pin vise lets me put a tiny hole in the bottom of the hand to run a wire through, and I actually got really lucky in this case as it popped the flame piece off as well. After carving out a bit of the flame, I managed to scrape just enough room underneath to stick a warm LED in there. Then I wrapped the cable around the arm, behind the back, and through the cape to get it down the leg. I also ended up tweaking the cloak shape just a bit as well by heating it with a lighter, and then bending it while it was still warm. Make sure to hold it well away from the flame so it doesn't burn. Now let's focus on the base. XPS scraps layered together with foam safe superglue forms the shape, and then we can go at it with the hot wire knife to get started. Respirator and ventilation. Do not forget. Sometimes I space out and forget to open a window and put on a mask before I start, and it is not pleasant. After that, I go at it with a knife and my fingers, shaping the landscape. I think the story here is the adventurer headed out into the swamp, maybe having heard of a dangerous creature that she was prepared to tackle with sword and flame. But she was expecting something towering and obvious and easy to find. She hadn't expected what lurked out there to be beneath the ground. Once the shape is done, you can use a butane torch, like you'd use to make a creme brulee to melt the foam a bit and get softer, more organic forms. Again, ventilation. Then it's time to mix up an extra swampy Mod Podge plaster and paint mix and dab it over the display. Once the textured bits are done, I add more plaster and build up some volume in a few spots. Then I can add bits of fine sand, some small cork rocks, and bits of fine root. Literally, they're roots. Once it's locked in place with white glue, watered down, and spritzed with isopropyl alcohol, I can take it outside to prime. Before priming the figure though, I want to make sure to mask off the flame with a liquid mask from Vallejo. I know these figures technically come pre-primed, but I don't find the cheap primer they use does a very good job, and it only takes a second to hit it again with something better. Then it's time to start painting. For the base, washes of purples and greens underneath to start. Then you layer over it with thin washes of swampy mixtures of browns and grays. Then add some tiny scale leaves and lichen to finish it and sell the scale. I think we can add a little more light to draw attention to the monster's hands that will be crawling out of the cave, so a purple LED buried in the back should do the trick there. Afterwards, I can fill the hole with some Tamiya putty and sand it smooth before repainting the sides back to black. Finally, I can mix up a little swampy water mixture with some UV resin tinted with alcohol inks. After it cures and cools down, UV resin warms up as it cures, which can still leave it a little soft. I can tap on some algae with a sewing pin filed flat, dipped in some thick acrylic paint. And now it's time for our character. I think to make her fit in with her environment, I'll give her a nice color scheme of green and golds, accented with warm leather. Take your time, go slow, and build up your colors in thin coats to avoid swamping details with paint. The base coat is super important, so the more careful you are here, the easier the later steps will be. Once it's time to do the skin, I can pull off the liquid mask and paint right up to the edge of the flame, then paint the flame with transparent inks. After a few washes and highlight layers, then she's ready to glue on the base. Off camera, I painted up some monster hands and stuck them in the hole. And finally, all that's left is to solder in the wires and paint the sides with Musso black. Then after one final touch-up on the flame, it's ready. The ground crunched underfoot, the sound too loud in the unnaturally still swamp. The stench of sour death hung in the air, cloying and fetid as it clung to the sorceress's nostrils, the smell of brimstone from her conjured flame doing little to improve the situation. The villagers had spoken of a dead swamp, but devoid of life, haunted by a dangerous evil that had claimed their once bountiful hunting grounds as its own. A gaunt, a kelpie, perhaps a wendigo. All quite manageable, she had thought, and worth a hefty bounty. But as the hours had passed, and she had not found so much of a track of the creature, a gnawing fear had begun to whisper to her that perhaps it was something else entirely. Something she had not prepared for. Alright, so maybe my tiny container addiction can be used for good. Try picking up a little display container from the craft store. The small size and built-in cover can really help you focus in on the story and keep the project simple. As always, links in the description with the supplies for this episode. It's the easiest way you can support the channel. But a lot of this you can also probably pick up at your local hobby and craft stores. And that's definitely something you should do if you can. Thanks for watching, I hope you have a lovely week, and I'll see you all next time.